Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I messed up, big time. It started on our 10th anniversary. You'd think after a decade of marriage, I'd know better. But there I was, sitting across from Mark, my husband, in the fanciest restaurant in town. He was beaming, raising his glass to us. And me? I was more interested in my phone buzzing relentlessly in my purse. I remember that night like it was yesterday. Mark had planned everything to perfection. The candlelit table, the soft jazz playing in the background, and that nervous smile he always had when trying to impress me. But amidst all that romance, my mind was elsewhere. Or rather, with someone else. As Mark reminisced about our honeymoon in Paris, my phone vibrated again. I peeked. A text from Mr. X, read. Can't stop thinking about you. I felt a rush of excitement, quickly masked by guilt. I typed a hasty reply, dismissing it as a work emergency, and forced a smile at Mark. The truth? My work emergency was Alex, a guy the first met at a conference 6 months ago. Charming, adventurous, and the complete opposite of Mark. Our affair was a thrilling escape from my mundane married life. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. Over the next few weeks, my nights with Alex became bolder. We started meeting in public, a risky game that somehow made it more exhilarating. Mark, bless his heart, was too caught up in his own world to notice at first. But then, things started to change. He began asking questions, wondering why I was working late so often, why my phone was always on silent. I brushed off his concerns with excuses, but the tension was building. One night, I told Mark one had to stay late for a project. In reality, I was meeting Alex at a downtown bar. As I left, I had this nagging feeling that something was off. I glanced back and saw Mark, standing at the window, watching me leave. My heart sank, but I pushed the guilt away and drove off. At the bar, Alex was waiting, his usual charming self. But midway through the night, my phone lit up with a message from Mark. Everything okay? You've been gone a long time. I replied with another lie and tried to focus on Alex, but something felt different. Later that night, driving back home, I noticed a car that seemed to be following me. Panic set in, but when I turned into our street, the car disappeared. Was it Mark? Was he suspecting something? I couldn't shake off the feeling that my double life was catching up to me. When I got home, Mark was asleep, or at least pretending to be. I crawled into bed, my mind racing. I knew I was playing with fire, but I wasn't ready to give up the thrill. Not yet. Every lie weaves a little bit of a web, right? And boy, was I spinning a complex one. I thought I was being slick, juggling my secret and my marriage. But the truth? It was all spiraling out of control, faster than I could handle. It started with that darn receipt. I had been careless, a fatal flaw in my dual life. Mark found a hotel receipt in my purse, a receipt from a rendezvous with Alex. I could see the confusion in his eyes when he confronted me. I panicked, conjured up a story about planning a surprise getaway for us. The look of relief on his face broke my heart, but I was too deep in my lies to back out now. Meanwhile, Alex was getting restless. He wanted more, he wanted me all to himself. The thrill of the affair was no longer enough, he was pressuring me to leave Mark. The thought terrified me. I loved Mark, or at least, I used to. I was torn between the comfort of my marriage and the excitement of my affair. Things escalated quickly. One evening, while I was supposedly working late, Mark called. He sounded odd, his voice strained. Just checking in, he said, but I could sense something was off. My paranoia grew when I noticed a car similar to Mark's parked near my office more than once. Was he following me? The next day, while I was in the shower, Mark did something he had never done before. He went through my phone. I realized this when I found my apps rearranged. My heart sank. I knew he had seen the messages, the calls. But when I confronted him, he denied it. We were both pretending, living in a facade of trust that had long crumbled. The confrontation came unexpectedly. One evening, Mark sat me down and looked me straight in the eyes. "Are we okay?" he asked. I plastered on a fake smile, assuring him we were more than okay. But his gaze didn't waver. It was as if he was looking right through my lies. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a whirlwind of anxiety. What if Mark knew everything? What if he was just waiting for me to confess? But every time I thought about coming clean, fear gripped me. Fear of losing everything, my husband, my home, the life we had built together. The days that followed were a blur of tension and unspoken suspicions. Mark became more withdrawn, and I, more paranoid. Our home felt like a battlefield, with both of us tiptoeing around an unexploded bomb. In the midst of this, my relationship with Alex became strained. He sensed my hesitation, my fear of leaving Mark. We argued, the thrill of our secret meetings turning sour. I was caught between two worlds, unable to find my footing in either. As the lies piled up, so did my guilt. I looked at Mark, the man who had loved me unconditionally, and felt a profound sense of loss. I was losing him, piece by piece, with every lie I told. But the web I had woven was too intricate, too tangled to escape without destroying everything in its path. Every secret has its shelf life, and mine was about to expire. There I was, living a lie, thinking I could outsmart the inevitable. But you know what they say about playing with fire. The day I decided to end things with Alex was like waking up from a bad dream. The excitement that once drove me into his arms now felt like chains. I was determined to cut ties, to salvage what was left of my marriage. But oh, how naive I was to think it would be that simple. I met Alex at our usual cafe, the place where it all began. His face lit up seeing me, but his smile faded as I spoke. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Alex's expression turned from confusion to anger. He begged, he pleaded, he couldn't believe I was walking away. But I was firm, or at least I tried to be. Leaving the cafe, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but it was quickly replaced by a sinking feeling of guilt. What had I done to my life, to Mark's life? The drive home was a blur, tears clouding my vision. At home, Mark was different. He had been distant lately, but that day, he was attentive, almost too attentive. He proposed a family vacation, a chance to reconnect. I saw the hope in his eyes, a hope that pained me. I agreed, desperate for a chance to mend things, even if deep down, I knew some things were beyond repair. The vacation was set, a week in a cozy mountain cabin. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to heal. But fate had other plans. The night before we left, I found a letter on my car's windshield. It was from Alex, a plea to reconsider, filled with promises and apologies. I tore it up, my heart racing. If Mark saw this. Our trip started off well, despite the undercurrent of tension. We hiked, we laughed, we tried to be the family we once were. But the lie I was living wouldn't let me enjoy the moment. I was always looking over my shoulder, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then, the unimaginable happened. We were having lunch in a quaint little diner when Alex walked in. The look on his face was one of desperation, of a man who had nothing left to lose. My heart stopped. This couldn't be happening. What followed was a blur of shouting, of accusations flying. Mark stood up, his face a mix of shock and anger. "Who is this?" he demanded. Alex, fueled by rejection and hurt, spilled everything. The affair, the lies, the broken promises. I tried to intervene, but the words wouldn't come. I was frozen, watching my world crumble around me. The kids, confused and scared, started crying. People in the diner were staring, whispering. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare. Mark grabbed the kids and left, leaving me there with Alex, who was now just a stranger filled with bitterness. I sat there, alone, the weight of my choices crushing me. I had lost everything: my husband, my children, my dignity. All because I thought I could have the best of both worlds. Sometimes, you don't realize the magnitude of your mistakes until the dust settles. And let me tell you, the aftermath of my choices was like a tornado ripping through my life, leaving nothing but chaos in its wake. The drive back from the mountain cabin was the longest and loneliest journey of my life. With every mile, the reality of what I had done, of what I had lost, sank in deeper. Mark, my rock, the father of my children, had seen the worst of me. And the look in his eyes, it was a mixture of betrayal, hurt, and disbelief. I tried calling him, dozens of times. Each call went straight to voicemail. I sent texts, emails, pleading for a chance to explain, to apologize. But there was only silence on the other end. Mark had blocked me out of his life, just like I had blocked out the consequences of my actions. Returning to an empty home was surreal. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the life and laughter that used to fill the space. I wandered from room to room, each corner a reminder of the family I had broken. But the storm wasn't over. Alex, the man I thought I knew, the man I risked everything for, showed his true colors. Rejected and hurt, he started a smear campaign against me. Rumors spread like wildfire, painting me as the villain in our sordid tale. And I guess, in many ways, I was. Friends I had known for years began to distance themselves. Invitations stopped coming, calls went unanswered. The few who did speak to me offered nothing but cold stares and harsh words. I was a pariah in my own community, a cautionary tale of what happens when you throw away a good thing for a fleeting thrill. The loneliness was suffocating. Every day was a battle against the overwhelming guilt and shame. I missed my children terribly. Their rooms, once filled with noise and laughter, stood silent and untouched. I would give anything to hear their voices, to hold them close, but I had lost that right. Nights were the hardest. The darkness seemed to amplify my regrets, replaying every wrong decision I had made. Sleep was elusive, a distant memory from a past life. I was living in a nightmare, one that I had created. Amidst this turmoil, there were moments of clarity, brief instances where I faced the harsh truth. I had been selfish, reckless. I had gambled with the most important things in my life and lost. The realization was brutal, but necessary. Through it all, one thing became painfully clear: I was alone. The people I thought were my friends had turned their backs. The man I thought I loved had used me as a pawn in his game of revenge. And the family I cherished was gone, taken away by my own hand. There's nothing like a courtroom to make you face the music, to strip away any illusions you might still cling to. As I sat there, lawyers flinging words like infidelity and irreconcilable differences, I felt like the main character in a tragic play. Only, this was my life, and the stakes were painfully real. The day Mark filed for divorce hit me like a ton of bricks. Despite everything, part of me still clung to the hope that we could fix things. But as I held the divorce papers in my shaking hands, that hope vanished. This was really happening. I sought legal advice, but my options were limited. With evidence of my affair out in the open, the odds were stacked against me. The lawyer I consulted was sympathetic but realistic. "This is going to be a tough fight," he said, his words a sobering confirmation of my fears. As the proceedings began, I braced myself for a battle. But nothing could have prepared me for the pain of facing Mark across the courtroom. There he was, the man I had vowed to love and cherish, now a stranger armed with a legal team ready to dismantle the life we had built together. The evidence presented against me was overwhelming. Text messages, hotel receipts, witness testimonies, each one a nail in the coffin of my defense. I sat there, head bowed, as my mistakes were laid bare for all to see. The shame was suffocating, each accusation a reminder of the hurt I had caused. But the hardest blow came from the most unexpected source, my own children. They refused to speak to me, their silence a deafening verdict of their feelings. I understood their anger, their sense of betrayal. But the absence of their voices in my life was a torture I couldn't bear. As if the crumbling of my family wasn't enough, my parents, too, expressed their disappointment. "We raised you better than this," my mother said over the phone, her voice laced with a sadness that cut through me. My father, a man of few words, simply said, "I don't understand how you could do this." Their words, their withdrawal, felt like losing my foundation all over again. The divorce proceedings dragged on, each session a brutal reminder of the consequences of my actions. The once shared dreams and plans for the future were now points of contention, assets to be divided, memories to be split. Throughout it all, I was haunted by the question: how did I get here? How did I let things go so far? The guilt was a constant companion, gnawing at me during sleepless nights and long, empty days. As the legal battle waged on, I realized that this was more than just a divorce. It was a reckoning of my choices, a mirror reflecting the person I had become. And with each revelation, with each bitter argument, I felt further and further removed from the woman I once was, the woman I wanted to be. Starting over is like building a house on a broken foundation. You can try to patch things up, but deep down, you know it's never going to be the same. That's what my life felt like, a house of cards, trembling with the slightest breeze. Moving into the small, one-bedroom apartment felt like stepping into a different world. The walls were bare, the rooms echoed with the emptiness of my new reality. This was no longer a home, it was a reminder of everything I had lost. As I unpacked my few belongings, I couldn't help but think of Mark and the kids, now miles away, starting a new life without me. The thought was a knife in my heart. I had lost not just my family, but my identity as a wife and mother. What was I now? Just a woman with a tainted past and an uncertain future. I tried to keep myself busy, to fill the silence with something, anything. I took up painting, something I had always wanted to do but never had the time for. But as the brush moved across the canvas, the colors seemed dull, the images lifeless. Nothing could fill the void. In my loneliness, I made the mistake of seeking comfort in the arms of someone new. I met David through a dating app, a man who knew nothing of my past. With him, I tried to be someone else, someone unburdened by mistakes and regrets. But the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you bury it. Our relationship was short-lived. As soon as David learned about my past, about the scandal that had upended my life, he distanced himself. "I can't handle this kind of drama," he said, his words a familiar echo of rejection. I couldn't blame him. My reputation was a shadow I couldn't escape. Then, when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Alex reappeared. The man who had been the catalyst for my downfall now stood at my door, anger in his eyes. "You ruined everything," he spat, blaming me for the mess we had both created. His words were venomous, his anger a reflection of his own guilt and regret. Our confrontation was heated, raw with emotions long suppressed. But in the end, it was clear, whatever we had was over, destroyed by the very lies that had built it. He left, and with him went the last remnants of the illusion I had clung to. In the aftermath, I was left to confront the truth of who I had become. The affair, the lies, the destruction of my family, it was all on me. I had made choices, and now I was living with the consequences. Nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, haunted by memories of happier times. The sound of my children's laughter, the warmth of Mark's embrace. All of it felt like a distant dream, a life that was no longer mine. But it was in those sleepless nights that I began to reflect, to truly understand the magnitude of my actions. I had been selfish, driven by my desires without thought of the hurt I was causing. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but necessary for any hope of redemption. Life has a way of kicking you when you're down. Just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, it opened up and swallowed me whole. The world I knew, the person I was, all gone, leaving me to grapple with the wreckage. The day I lost my job felt like a cruel joke. The drama of my personal life had seeped into my professional world, staining it with whispers and sideways glances. My performance slipped, and my boss, though sympathetic at first, eventually had no choice. "I'm sorry," he said, handing me the severance papers. His apology was sincere, but it did little to ease the sting. Without a job, my financial situation became dire. The small savings I had dwindled rapidly, each bill a reminder of my dwindling stability. I started to look for work, but my reputation preceded me. Rejection became a constant companion, each no a reinforcement of my failures. Meanwhile, Mark was moving on. Through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances, I heard he had started dating someone. They said he looked happy, that he was moving forward. The news should have been a relief, but it felt like a punch to the gut. He was building a new life, one where I had no place. The loneliness was suffocating. I would go days without speaking to anyone, my voice a stranger to my own ears. I tried to reach out, to make new connections, but the effort felt insurmountable. My world had shrunk to the four walls of my apartment, a prison of my own making. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, my health began to deteriorate. Stress and isolation took their toll, manifesting in sleepless nights and a constant sense of anxiety. I lost weight, my reflection in the mirror a gaunt reminder of the vibrant woman I once was. I knew I needed help, but pride and shame held me back. Admitting I was struggling felt like conceding defeat, acknowledging that I had completely lost control of my life. But the truth was, I had lost control long ago. I clung to the memories of my children, their laughter a distant echo in my mind. The pain of their absence was a constant ache, a hole in my heart that nothing could fill. I missed their hugs, their chatter, the mundane yet precious moments of motherhood. In my moments of despair, I would sit and write letters to them, letters I knew I would never send. I poured my heart into those pages, apologies, explanations, expressions of love. It was a futile exercise, but it was all I had. The realization that I was alone in this battle was both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because I had no one to lean on, liberating because it meant I had only myself to rely on. It was time to face my demons, to confront the reality of what I had done and who I had become. It's strange how life can feel both empty and heavy at the same time. Each day was a reminder of what I had lost, a haunting echo of a life that once was. And the worst part? I knew I had no one to blame but myself. The news of Mark getting engaged was like reopening a wound I thought had begun to heal. It wasn't jealousy, nor was it anger. It was a profound sense of loss, a final confirmation that the life I once knew was truly over. In my desperation for connection, for some semblance of the family I had destroyed, I reached out to my children. I sent letters, gifts, tried calling. But their silence was a clear response. They wanted nothing to do with me. Each unanswered call, each unopened letter, was a dagger in my heart. I couldn't blame them, but that didn't lessen the pain. I heard about Mark's new partner, how she was with the kids. People said she was wonderful, that she had brought a new light into their lives. I should have been grateful for that, grateful that my children had someone to care for them. But it was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that another woman was taking the place I had so carelessly given up. My financial situation went from bad to worse. The job search remained fruitless, and my savings were long gone. Bills piled up, and one bleak morning, an eviction notice was slid under my door. It was the culmination of months of struggle, the final blow in a series of defeats. I sat on the floor, the notice in hand, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to truly feel the weight of my situation. The news of Mark's wedding came through social media, a distant cousin's post with pictures of the happy family. There they were, Mark, the kids, and his new wife, all smiles and joy. It should have been me there, standing beside him, watching our children grow. But choices have consequences, and mine had led me here, to this lonely, desolate place. I attended support groups, trying to find solace in shared experiences. Hearing others' stories of loss and redemption gave me a flicker of hope. But even in those rooms filled with understanding and empathy, I felt out of place. My story was a tapestry of betrayal and regret, a narrative that seemed to have no place among tales of unfortunate circumstances and bad luck. In those days, my small apartment felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on me, each item a reminder of a past life. Photos of happier times mocked me from their frames, and I found myself packing them away, unable to bear the memories they evoked. I tried to find solace in little things, a book, a walk in the park, a cup of coffee in a quiet cafe. But the joy in those moments was fleeting, always overshadowed by the ever-present cloud of my reality. In every story of downfall, there's a moment of clarity, a point where you realize you can either keep falling or start to climb back up. For me, that moment came in the quiet solitude of my empty apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of a life I once had. I remember scrolling through my phone, the screen illuminating faces that once were an integral part of my life. There they were, Mark and his new family, smiling on a sun-kissed beach. It was a picture of happiness, a stark contrast to the loneliness that engulfed me. I was happy for him, genuinely so, but it also served as a painful reminder of all that I had lost. In a moment of desperation, I reached out to old friends, hoping to rekindle relationships I had neglected. But the response was cold, distant. "I'm sorry. I just can't," said one. "It's complicated," said another. Their words, while not unkind, were clear. I was a chapter in their lives that they had closed. As I watched my social circle diminish to nothing, isolation became my constant companion. The silence of the apartment was deafening, a stark reminder of the consequences of my actions. My world had shrunk to these four walls, a self-made cell of regret and sorrow. I watched from afar as Mark and the kids celebrated milestones, birthdays, graduations, anniversaries. Each event was a dagger in my heart, a celebration I should have been part of. I sent cards, gifts, but they went unacknowledged, drifting into the void between us. It was in these moments of profound loneliness that I realized I needed help. Swallowing my pride, I sought therapy, a step towards understanding and, hopefully, forgiving myself. Sitting in that small, quiet office, facing a stranger who held no judgment, I began to unpack the layers of guilt and shame that had weighed me down. Therapy was not an easy journey. It forced me to confront the ugly truths about myself, the selfish choices and the hurt I had caused. But it also allowed me to see the possibility of a future, one where I could learn from my mistakes and maybe, just maybe, find a way to make amends. I started to volunteer at a local shelter, a small step towards giving back to a world I had taken so much from. In the faces of those I helped, I found a kind of solace, a shared understanding of struggle and the search for redemption. Through therapy, I began to understand that while I couldn't change the past, I could shape my future. It was a slow, often painful process, but with each passing day, I felt a little more like the person I wanted to be. I journaled, pouring my thoughts and feelings onto paper, a tangible expression of my journey. It was cathartic, a way to see my progress, to remind myself that while I had fallen, I was slowly getting back up. Sometimes, in the quiet of night, I'd find myself reflecting on the what-ifs and could-haves. It's a dangerous path, one that often leads to a dark place filled with regrets and painful memories. But it's also where I found the hardest truths. The news of Mark's new baby felt like a distant echo from another life. There they were, a picture-perfect family, a reminder of what could have been. I was happy for him, truly, but it also underscored the finality of everything that was lost. In a bid to escape the ghosts that haunted me, I decided to move to a new city. A fresh start, a chance to rebuild away from the memories and the judgmental eyes. But as I soon learned, you can change your surroundings, but you can't escape your past. The new city was a maze of unfamiliar faces and places, a stark contrast to the life I had left behind. I found a small apartment, its blank walls a canvas for a new beginning. But as the days passed, the loneliness followed, a constant reminder of the void within. I tried to immerse myself in this new life, to find solace in anonymity. I took up a job at a local bookstore, a quiet place that seemed a world away from the chaos of my past. The smell of old books and the hushed conversations of customers were a balm to my bruised soul. But the past has a way of creeping up when you least expect it. I'd catch glimpses of families, of couples, of happy moments that mirrored my own once upon a time. It was in these moments that the weight of my choices came crashing down, a tidal wave of regret and sorrow. I attended a few local events, trying to weave myself into the fabric of this new community. But the connections felt superficial, transient. I was like a ghost, drifting through life, unable to find a place to anchor myself. In the quiet of my apartment, I'd often find myself reflecting on everything that had transpired. The affair, the lies, the pain I had caused to the people I loved the most. It was a bitter pill to swallow, accepting that I was the architect of my own misery. I realized that understanding the impact of my actions wasn't just about feeling remorse. It was about acknowledging the hurt I had caused, the trust I had broken, and the irreversible change I had brought to the lives of those I loved. As I sat alone, surrounded by the remnants of a life I once dreamed of, I understood the full extent of my betrayal. It wasn't just about the act of infidelity. It was about the web of lies, the shattered trust, and the broken family left in its